Hermvids with Mr. Hermit. Educational videos about reading and writing. Guys, I think I'm in love. With this next video, this video is for Skill 5 for the Storytellers. This is all about point of view. Point of view is very important to your story. You got to figure it out before you even start the thing. You got to choose to tell your story. There are generally a few accepted options, but there's plenty of room to experiment with each. Sorry for freaking you out with this eyeball here. First person point of view is pretty popular, and it's pretty popular because it lets the reader kind of live through the main character's eyes. And you can think of eyes with first person because they use I when they tell the story. There are more decisions to make after you pick first person. There are a few ways to do this. There's the first person protagonist point of view. Protagonist is the word for a main character. So in this version, the main character is the one moving the action along, and you are following along in their brain. They're generally considered a good guy or good girl, or at least what's called an anti-hero, which is a character is the main character, but they misbehave frequently. They might be a criminal, but ultimately likable. This is the most popular form. Many stories are told in first-person protagonist point of view. Lots of young adult novels especially. Speak, Ready Player One, that's a first-person protagonist point of view. There's also the first-person sidekick point of view. It's when you don't tell it from the protagonist, but you're telling it from the point of view of a side character who's not really propelling the action forward. They're kind of watching almost. The character's reacting to what goes on around them. And there's usually a more dynamic character who's the focus, and this person's following them along or watching them. Excellent example of this are the great short stories by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, in which Watson's actually the one who tells the story. Here's Watson here on the left, that's Sherlock. Another great example is in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The character Chief Broom is a giant Native American who is mute, and he just kind of watches as the main character, R.P. McMurphy, makes mayhem of an insane asylum. These are first-person sidekick point of view, that's what I call it at least. Another type of first person is the antagonist point of view. You're still being told the story from a character's mind, but they're usually a psychopath, a villain, or a totally unsympathetic criminal. Edgar Allan Poe loves this because it portrays a really dark element to the story. The character Montresor in The Cask of Amontillado tells you his story from his point of view, and he enacts this horrific revenge on his ex-best friend. If you don't like first person, there is third person. We're skipping second person because second person is when you're narrating a story as you do this, you do that. It is possible, but it's very rare. So let's just skip the third person. You're telling it from the vantage point of a narrator. And the narrator could be a limited narrator or an omniscient narrator. Omniscient's the most popular, but limited is when the narrator focuses kind of above one character and their thoughts. So instead of bouncing around from this character to this character, the limited point of view for third person, the narrator can only focus on one. Whereas omniscient, it can bounce around to any character. Omniscient means all-seeing, so it kind of views everything that's going on in the story. Both of these point of view can be objective or subjective. Third-person objective is when the narrator describes what's happening to the character, but does not describe their thoughts. It's unbiased. It doesn't really delve into, it lets the reader kind of make up their own mind. If you've read Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, the narrator focuses on this old man who goes out to sea. It doesn't really describe anything too deep about what's going on. It doesn't make any judgment calls on this old man. It does follow him around, though. Subjective is more popular. It's where you're in the thoughts of all these different characters, and also there are judgments being thrown around from the narrator. It's a lot more in-depth. Harry Potter series, Game of Thrones, which the dragons are from right there. These are all third-person subjective and also omniscient. There's some even more experimentation that you guys can do when you are telling your stories. There's the unreliable narrator. This is where you can't really trust what the narrator's telling you, and you know that. They're usually someone who is a liar, someone who's unstable, but we're seeing the world through their eyes, and it makes for a really unique perspective. A Telltale Heart, which I showed you guys in a previous video, has an unreliable narrator, someone who you can't totally trust what they're saying. There's also something called an epistolary narrative. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's a story that's told all through letters, or text messages, or a different form of communication. There are some restrictions to this, but there's also some benefits. In Perks of Being a Wallflower, there's this mysterious element, and it's almost like a diary entry. It's a great book, great way to check out this type of narrative. There's the past tense narration. This is most popular. Almost all stories are told in past tense. Almost like you tell your friend a story of what happened to you, these authors are telling the story like it already happened. But some stories are told in present tense with verbs as if they're happening right now. I walk up to the house, I knock on the door, as opposed to I walked up to the house and I knocked on the door. Most popular present tense narration is used in The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. It gives that action-packed story a current action-packed feel to it. Let's figure out what your practice is going to be for point of view. In the first-person point of view, the point of view practice, you're going to choose one of the following situations and describe it twice using two different types of narration that I just taught you. You can pick one of these situations, describe it using a narration type 1, it can be any of these over here, and then you describe the same situation in narration type 2. This way you guys can experiment with what different types of narration can be used for, what their pros and cons are, and pick a style that's best for you.